Hi, I'm Cisar. I work with Golden Sands Resource Conservation and Development Council. I am a regional aquatic invasive species coordinator, and I work with Green Lake, Marquette, Waushara, and Wapaka counties. What that means is that I get to spend a lot of my days over the summer out on lakes and rivers like Big Green Lake here, keeping my eyes out and looking for new and existing populations of aquatic invasive species. Whatever I find out here, then I bring back to you and lake organizations like the Green Lake Association. Curly-leaf pondweed is one of our bad plant species we have here in Big Green Lake. Interestingly, it starts its growth in the fall, maintains that growth through the winter, and then has that big kickoff in the spring, out-competing our native plant species. The problem with curly-leaf pondweed is that it can grow so dense that it impacts our fishing and our recreational boating. Although it dies off early in the summer, which may sound like a good thing, it actually lends itself to the release in phosphorus, increasing algal growth and nuisance plant growth. Curly-leaf pondweed is easiest to identify by its leaves. As the name suggests, the leaves are curly. As you can see here, they almost look like lasagna noodles or maybe even fried bacon. The second key identification feature is looking at the leaf edge. If you look closely, you can see the edge is serrated, just like your steak knives. Eurasian Watermilfoil is one of our other common invasive species in Wisconsin that we also have in Big Green Lake. While it's similar to curly-leaf pondweed, being able to grow into dense mats, it does grow all season long. The issue with Eurasian Watermilfoil is that every time the plant fragments, it's able to regrow those fragments. So every time a boat rips through a plant bed, one plant may be coming into 12. When you think you might have Eurasian Watermilfoil, there's a couple key identification features that you can look for. One would be looking at the leaf itself. If you notice when you look at one individual leaf that it looks like a bird's feather, that's a good indication that you're looking at a watermilfoil species. The next thing to look for is how many leaflets are on each side of the vein. If you count in pairs of 12, you're looking at invasive Eurasian. We do have native species, which would be less than 12. Panning to look at the whole plant, another way to identify Eurasian from our natives is the distance from leaf to the next set of leaves. Eurasian Watermilfoil will have a larger gap from one leaf to the next because it grows more quickly, not allowing to put out leaves as fast. Our native watermilfoils grow much slower, therefore they're able to set leaves out more quickly along the stem. So far we've talked about aquatic invasive species in the water. Purple Loosestrife is one of our other bad plants that we have along Big Green Lake, except it's actually more of a wetland species. Purple Loosestrife is very easy to identify in July and August when it blooms into this beautiful pink purplish spike flower. But when you're looking at it up close, and this is new growth from this year, is that it has a squared stem, where most of our native plants typically you think of having round stems. Fortunately, Purple Loosestrife does have a biocontrol, which is this little beetle. It feeds on the plant and decreases its energy so it's not able to grow as big and robust as it would like. That allows the native plants to be able to compete against the Purple Loosestrife and help balance the wetland biodiversity. Moving from plants to animals, we have zebra mussels. Zebra mussels are relatively new to Big Green Lake. If you've been on the lake in the last few years after zebra mussels have been introduced, you may have found these washed up on your shoreline or along the beaches. They have really sharp edges, and if you step on them, it's just like stepping on a broken bottle. It's not pleasant. Some of the other issues that we have with zebra mussels away from our shorelines is that people seem to think that zebra mussels clean the water. This kind of has a negative intonation because it's not cleaning the water in the sense that it's dirty, but it's actually eating the base of the food chain. So that impacts our recreational fishing opportunities across the lake. It also, because we're taking out so much of the base of the food chain, clears the water so that sunlight can get deeper, which adds to our nuisance plant growth populations and our algal blooms. One other issue, if for people who have boats in the lake all season long, is that when zebra mussels are first born, they're so small they're microscopic. And that gives them the ability to get sucked up into your intake pipes. As they grow and develop in there, they can actually damage your boat's motor. So rusty crayfish is one of our other non-native species of animals that we have here around Big Green Lake. Unlike the other species that we've talked about in this video so far today, they've all been native to Europe and Asia. Rusty crayfish is actually native to the United States, but it's not native to Wisconsin. It causes issues here in our lakes and rivers because they are a very aggressive animal. They will outcompete and fight off any native crayfish that are in our rivers and lakes, and they'll kind of act like lawnmowers. They will chop up more food and fight with more animals than they need to survive and gain the habitat that they need to live. The easiest way to identify a rusty crayfish is when you would go, if you would to, pick up a crayfish, you would pick him up behind his pinchers. And where you would go to place your thumb and forefinger, there's actually a red rusty thumbprint spot. And that's where they get their name. The last animal species here that I want to talk about that is in Green Lake is the common carp. We see it throughout the summer, but we really do see a bigger push of them in the spring as they're making their way to their spawning beds in some of these quieter bays along the lake. We're here on the County K Marsh today because this is where we really do see them being active and where we see the biggest impacts that they have on the lake. Common carp are bottom feeders, so they're stirring up the bottom of the sediment, and that does two things. It brings the sediment up into the water column, and it's also releasing phosphorus back into the water column. That kind of creates this chocolate milk soupy mix that we have back here, which doesn't allow any of our native plants to take growth. All that means is that we do not have a healthy ecosystem back here. It's not productive in any means and is just negatively impacting the health of Green Lake. So up till this point, we've talked about aquatic invasive species that are either in or around Big Green Lake. Now I want to transition to a couple of invasive species that are in our area and that we should be aware of and be concerned about entering Green Lake. The first one I want to talk about is called Brittle Naiad. It's already in the Fox River and in Lake Puckaway, so it's really close to being in Green Lake. It's kind of in our backyard, so to speak. Brittle Naiad is very similar in respect to Eurasian Watermilfoil or curlyleaf pondweed, that it's a plant that can come in very dense into our lake and cause issues with the fishery and our recreational boating. It's also similar to Eurasian Watermilfoil in that if pieces break off, it's able to go replant itself, which is why it's called Brittle Naiad, because it breaks apart very easily. The other plant-like non-native species that I want to talk about is called Starry Stonewort. It's new to Wisconsin in the last 6 years, originally first being found in the southeast part of the state. It's now, as of last fall, made its way into Marquette County. So it's a lot closer to being at our doorstep here in Green Lake. So Starry Stonewort can cause very dense populations like Eurasian Watermilfoil or curlyleaf pondweed. The problem with Starry Stonewort is that it's actually not a plant, but it's what we call a macroalga. So it's going to have the same plant-like structure, but it's actually unicellular. The problem that this leads to is that we don't really have a good idea of what management protocols work best. Different states throughout the Midwest and out east have been doing different research to try and find what works best to manage Starry Stonewort, but at this time there has been no clear success. So the best thing we can do to help keep Green Lake healthy is to be on the lookout for Starry Stonewort and keep it out of our lakes. The key thing to look for in Starry Stonewort is the reproductive structure, and that is what we call a bulbil. It's unique in that this bulbil, this little white potato-like structure, is a 6-pointed star. No other plant is going to have this type of reproductive structure. So keep an eye out for it. The last invasive species that I want to talk to you about today is Spiny Waterflea. Spiny Waterflea is actually a small organism that floats in the water column. The problem with Spiny Waterflea is that they have similar impacts to the lake that zebra mussels do. They're eating the base of our food chain. So not only are they impacting our fisheries, but they're also clearing out the water so that sunlight is able to filter down deeper. That leads to one of two problems. Either an increase in nuisance plant growth or an increase in algae blooms. Because zebra mussels are already in Big Green Lake, the problem that may occur if Spiny Waterflea are introduced is that we double that impact, which means we'll likely see an even a bigger increase in algae blooms, or we might be seeing more occurrence of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. The other problem with Spiny Waterflea is that even though they are a small organism, because they have these hard spines, our smaller fish are not able to eat them, so they don't even provide a food resource for our fisheries. So now that we've talked about different aquatic invasive species, not only in Green Lake, but the ones we're concerned about coming to Big Green Lake, there's a couple things you can do and be aware of to help prevent the health of not only Green Lake here, but our lakes throughout Wisconsin. Making sure to inspect all of your boating equipment when you're leaving a lake. Removing any aquatic plants, mud, or water before you leave. Draining all of your water, not only from your live wells, but from any coolers that might be keeping fish, and even your boat motor. And then making sure that whatever you have with you that you brought to the lake, you're leaving with that, but you're not taking any of the lake with you as you go. And if you're fishing, make sure that you're buying bait from a Wisconsin licensed bait dealer. These are all things that we can do to help prevent the health of our waters. Remember, things like zebra mussels and Spiny Waterflea can be really small and can hide in the smallest amount of water. And if we don't take the care to clean our equipment and we come into lakes like Big Green Lake, we could be introducing the new invasive species that cause issues and management concerns on our waters.